Coming up on this episode of Nintendo Cartridge Society, Dr. Mark, my dear Dr. Patrick, welcome to Nintendo franchises. It's dangerous to go alone, so the Nintendo Cartridge Society goes with you. Welcome to Nintendo Cartridge Society. My name is Patrick Ellers, and I am joined, as I am always joined, by my co-host, Mark Mitchell. Mark, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I've talked about in the past that my husband and I have been watching a lot of Amazing Race.
Yes.
Which, of course, means that we're running out of seasons. There is only, Amazing Race is like petroleum. It's a finite resource. There's only so much of it.
Wow, getting political.
And so we have to find like other shows to like pepper in our watching, so that way we're like making the Amazing Race last as long as we possibly can. And so we just started watching Flavor of Love, the 2006 Flavor Flav reality dating show. We're like 2 episodes in, and we're really having a lot of fun.
Well, that's good. I guess if you're having fun with it, man, Flavor of Love is one of those things that I let fall out of my brain entirely. Like, do you know what I mean? Where I'm just like, nope, that doesn't exist in my universe in 2021. I just don't even. It doesn't have any space in my head.
Yeah.
So Sarah was gone this last week, so I had a lot of time. That I was like, I need to just start like watching. I just need to be watching TV. Like, give me TV shows, right?
Mm-hmm.
And at first, I was doing a Community rewatch, starting like right at the end of season 1, and I was enjoying it, but then like the show gets dark and weird, and like is a pretty negative experience. So then I switched over to Kim's Convenience, and let me tell you, Kim's Convenience is sweet and funny, and the writing and acting, all of it's incredible. I love that show. I'm so happy it was like upbeat and positive and like got me out of my like Community depression spiral.
Yeah, it's really fun. We watched, I don't know if we finished the most previous season that went up on Netflix, but we've seen the previous seasons and really liked it. Of course, it's this podcast, so if we're not talking about Nintendo, it's either Star Wars or Marvel. And yes. I'm really excited for the Shang-Chi movie. I can't believe that's coming out this year.
I know,
but
outrageous.
It stars, I'm blanking on his name, but the guy from Kim's Convenience.
Yeah,
and the dad from and then the dad from Kim's Convenience is a huge Star Wars fan, and so he showed up in The Mandalorian in this past season. Man,
that is him. That is
we're
him.
Connecting.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. He's like the X-wing pilot. Yeah. So
the one opposite Dave Filoni.
Our worlds are colliding.
Wow. This is so good. I recommend Kim's Convenience to anyone and everyone. Mark, we're screwing around too much though, because we have a thing that we need to address from our previous episode. As listeners will know, we were giving away a code of Tokyo Mirage Sessions Sharp FE Encore for the Switch, which I guess is the only platform that the game is on. So I'm sorry to specify this isn't Dragon Quest XI Echoes of an Elusive Age Definitive Edition. But we got an email from Jason who had been selected, and he said, Mark and Patrick, thank you so much for choosing me. I actually found Tokyo Mirage Sessions at Walmart over the weekend on sale for $10 and picked up a copy. Would you like to choose a backup winner for the code? Thank you so much. Jason, we will be drawing a new random number to give to someone who submitted their Mirage. Mark, I'm now generating the number. The number is 10, which means it goes to Brad. Brad said that his Mirage would be Yoshi. Hold on, let me actually pull up Brad's email and see if he gave an explanation as to why Yoshi. He says, Yoshi would be my Mirage, the most lovable Nintendo character.
Kind of hard to argue with that, but Brad, congratulations. Jason, Brad, myself, anybody else who's played this game, let's get a conversation going about your experience with this whenever you play it. I know with RPGs, like I sat on this game for months, so yeah, I would love to hear from people who are playing this game.
Also, people that can, speaking of people playing a game, man, sometimes the transitions work and sometimes they don't at all. The Sonic Forces borrowing program, you want to be a part of it. Borrow my copy of Sonic Forces. All you gotta do is email us at Nintendo Cartridge Society at gmail.com. And give us a mailing address so I can send you my copy of Sonic Forces. There may be a copy of Untitled Goose Game in there. You have no control over whether you get Untitled Goose Game or Sonic Forces. It just happens, and that's life. Mark, are you ready to get into our topic of the day?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay, so today we are talking about entry points, good first games in Nintendo franchises. And Mark, you posed this one. Is there something that like sparked this sort of like question or this like thought exercise for you?
It's more just like in general, like there are so many games in the franchise. Like I guess actually really what kind of brought it up is I've been playing Super Mario 3D World, and this is like the first time, and I'm enjoying it, but it's not my favorite Mario game, and that has just got me thinking like, where does this exist in like if I was trying to introduce somebody to Mario for the first time? Like like spoilers, but like 3D World probably wouldn't be the one I would start with. So what do you start with? Like if you look at the history of like 3D Mario, which one do you hold up as? Because they're all so different. Like which one do you hold up as like this is the best one for somebody to try for the first time?
Yeah, there was a while a couple years ago where I was like trying to think about the series of games that like because the Mario games are so different but also like so similar to the Mario games that came before them. And so there were, if you look at Super Mario Brothers, Super Mario Brothers 2, and Super Mario Brothers 3 on the NES, each of them feel like they don't actually feel like they're part of a Mario trilogy, right? Like if there's an original Super Mario Brothers trilogy, it is Super Mario Brothers, Super Mario Brothers: The Lost Levels, and Super Mario Land. Like that's an ABC of like that's one solid trilogy of Marios. And meanwhile, Super Mario Brothers 3 is almost the beginning of a trilogy that goes Super Mario Brothers 3, Super Mario World, Yoshi's Island, and then Yoshi's Island is the beginning of a Yoshi series. So like there are so many different ways to like look at it and try to like navigate around what these series are. So we thought we would go through some of Nintendo's biggest, most like meaningful, impactful franchises and talk about what the best entry points are. So a couple things like right off the bat, right? Is that there are three franchises that we're really not going to be discussing: Star Fox, Mario Kart, and Smash. And in the case of Mario Kart and Smash, it's kind of because I don't know if it's unpopular to say it, but like the most recent one is always going to be the best one.
Yeah, or the one that I would recommend to most people for sure.
Totally. Or, which one can you play? Like they're also all fun. Like and then in the case of Star Fox, I guess that's maybe less the case and more just like why even introduce someone to like the series that is Star Fox when you really just want them to play Star Fox and Star Fox 64? Like that's
right. And I feel yeah, and like also some is just like with we're not going to talk about F-Zero or Star Tropics or like games like that
or
where
Pilot
it's just
Wings, yeah.
Right. Yeah, there are just some we're not going to talk about, basically, is what this disclaimer up front is.
Right. Look, we'll get through a whole episode without us bringing up Rusty's Real Deal Baseball, okay?
Oh, darn it.
Oh, no. I mean, sorry, you already did Star Tropics, so like I just had to pile on. And so sort of in that same vein, let's bring in our first franchise here. And, listeners of this show will know that you and I aren't the biggest Pokemon fans, so it is perhaps odd that Pokemon is such a big mega franchise for Nintendo that I feel like it would be foolish of us to ignore it entirely. But Mark, how did you approach Pokemon?
So what I ended up doing was I kind of cheated, and I have like two answers.
Okay.
The first is that if you're coming from Pokemon Go and like that is your primary Pokemon experience, then I recommend Let's Go because I really loved Let's Go Eevee. Like I was shocked how much I liked that game. Uh, I like that they use the Go catch mechanic where you're just
Hmm.
like tossing the Pokeball instead of having to whittle down their health in a traditional RPG battle. Like I liked that a lot. I thought like the world was fun. I thought the fact that like the Pokemon like travel with you and all that kind of stuff was just really entertaining. Like I liked it a lot. So if you're coming from Pokemon Go, that's the one I recommend. Otherwise, this is one for me that I think you just get the latest generation. So
Yeah.
I think if you were picking it up today, I would just start with Sword and Shield.
Yeah, and I think that's good advice and sort of an offshoot of um like I also sort of have two answers. And there is the one that is a more like generic sort of statement, which is pick up whichever one you think you're going to be able to play with other people. Like if there is
Mm,
someone in your house who like has a DS, like maybe you need to get, Black and White 2 or whatever is actually
yeah.
on the DS. So, because like it is fundamentally like a social game. You play it a lot by yourself, but like trading and trainer battles with like other people is such a big and appealing part of it that like this is one where you can bend to whatever is available, right? Um, and to that end, I really think my like actual realist answer is just Pokemon Go. It's free. You can play it on your phone. Everyone has phones. People are still playing it. It has a ton of the monsters in it. And you get to go outside and walk around. Like, if you're just looking for a way to like be introduced to what Pokemon are and like figure out that world a little bit, you will be introduced to that world in a real way in Pokemon Go. Certainly it leaves out a lot of the, like turn-based battle kind of stuff, but I mean, I don't know, for all of these things, um I feel like I'm approaching this as the person has no nostalgia for the thing.
Mhm.
And I think Pokemon Go does such a good job of making it engaging without forcing you to, rely on uh, your built-in love of the thing already.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think you are spot on. Like with the one of the main entries you should play is the one that you can play with other people no matter
Yeah,
what platform that is on. That is so yeah, that is definitely what people should do.
because it's not just like there is like the multiplayer and the trading component, but there's also just the like talking about like what you're able to find, and especially if
Yeah.
you have someone who has the other version of the game, like forget about it. You should be playing that one.
Yeah, so true.
All right. So those aren't the most solid answers for this one. I guarantee our answers for the rest of these franchises are going to be more definitive.
We're easing into the hot tub that is this episode for sure.
That's right. Okay, let's get into the first like hard and fast one here, right? Fire Emblem. Would you like to go first, or should I?
Go ahead for this one.
So for Fire Emblem, I actually went at it the same way I experienced Fire Emblem, which means that I was going. Fire Emblem Awakening is my answer, but that is actually not the game that I played first. I first tried to play the Shadow Dragon, the remake of the original on DS, but that game is clunky and I never got through it. Fire Emblem Awakening is the first one that I played all the way through. And well, I think you can make an argument for Three Houses as a good starting point, as I suspect you will shortly, Mark. um, I think this game does all of that same social stuff without making you run around a big empty monastery. And like the monastery can be fun. Like it is an immersive thing, and like Three Houses is very good for that. But it's just like a cleaner sort of menu based relationship building thing in Fire Emblem Awakening. Um, Awakening also does a great job of incorporating your character's relationships, like making so every character can pair up with another character and have a child, right? And the children are like come back in time from the future, so like you never even see the children born during the events of the game. They just come back in time from the future, and it makes like sense in the context and in the story that is Fire Emblem Awakening. It's a similar mechanic as what happens in a Fire Emblem Fates, but like there's no, it just like in Fates it just happens and you're like, oh, their child is off in a different dimension where they age for a while, and you're like, what? Like it's such a like pull you out of the moment, but like it's everything is so wrapped up and so built in cleanly in Fire Emblem Awakening. And then on top of that, three of the main characters in the game are Robin, Chrom, and Lucina, and they are all-time great Fire Emblem characters. As evidenced by the fact that all three of them are in Smash. It's the only Fire Emblem game that has three characters represented in Smash. And then there are a bunch of other rad supporting characters that it's super easy to fall in love with. I think Awakening is the way to go.
So I think that's a compelling case. For me, you're absolutely right. I did pick Fire Emblem Three Houses, which was my entry into like playing and completing a Fire Emblem game. And I think for me, the reason why I recommend Three Houses is a couple of things. One, from having not played like Awakenings or any of the earlier games, to me, it feels like Three Houses is much more approachable in its systems. And I know for some people, like it's dumbed down a little bit compared to the other games, or like it has removed features. But for me, that's actually kind of like a virtue where I think it's really easy for me to be overwhelmed with systems in RPGs. And eventually you can like you work out how they work and you focus on the systems that you want to focus on. But when I'm like starting a new franchise, I am like, I don't know, I'm kind of looking for like a path into it that is easy for me to wrap my head around. And for for Three Houses, like I felt like I could really do that. The other part of it is um the monastery stuff I really liked. And I think it was because, like having that like school trope and the house trope
Yeah.
and all that kind of stuff that is featured in things like Harry Potter and like franchises that I was familiar with, like was also a really easy entry point for it. Like that's what got me the most excited about Fire Emblem Three Houses is like, oh, it has this whole like school simulator thing. And that seems like really fun to be able to interact with these characters in that sort of like magic school setting. And so that's why for me, Fire Emblem Three Houses is the one that I would recommend. Like apparently it doesn't, it doesn't do like romances the best. It doesn't do combat the best or anything like that. But it felt so approachable.
Yeah, and it definitely is approachable, and like you've got replayability. On Tuesday's episode, I was talking about my experience playing Fire Emblem Fates this last week, and about how it feels like an incomplete product, right? That like I can see that there are other paths and there are like little missions and stuff that I could be playing if only I threw more money at it. And I guess some of that has been added now. But like there are three complete and totally different paths through four, really, because the red dragons, no, what is the red, no, what is the name of Edelgard's house?
Oh, I don't know. Was this in the DLC?
No. The it's one of the main houses. Anyway, that
Oh,
path splits in two. It doesn't matter.
oh, the Black Eagles?
Is that right?
No, no,
Black
no, no, no. We
eagles,
got to get
golden
this.
deer,
Blue
blue lions.
Blue Lions. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. In any event, yeah, all like it has so much content. You could keep playing that game forever. Are you finding it, Mark?
I am looking it up because this is going to Black Eagles. Ooh,
Black
all right.
Eagles. Nailed it. Yeah, I mean I think they are both really good starting places. You can't really go wrong, I think, with either of those two games. Next up on our list is Kirby. I'm gonna make you go first on this one.
Okay, for me, the answer is super easy, and it is Kirby Superstar. This was originally a Super Nintendo game that is now available on the SNES Switch Online. I think it was also on the Super Nintendo Classic Edition. But this game, I think, it's still the ultimate Kirby game. Just like the amount of content is kind of crazy. It has like one, two, I don't know, like 8 or something different modes and games that you play, and some of them are to like varying degrees of
I was gonna say
weightiness.
a lot of those are like mini games, right?
Well, no, I think there's 2 that I would classify as like mini games, and then there are other ones where like the mode isn't super fleshed out, like one called like what is it called? I'm Gourmet Race. That's what it
Mm.
is. Where you're just like it's basically just like that one is pretty short. It's just a race. But like there's other ones like The Great Cave Offensive, which is like a Metroidvania adventure. Um there is Spring Breeze, which is a remake of the first Kirby game, like kind of like a little like truncated remake. I feel like it is the ultimate Kirby experience. And so that you can play a lot of it in co-op. Like that is why Kirby Superstar I think is the best. There was a DS remake called Kirby Superstar Ultra that added 4 additional modes that I didn't play at the time. So, but I think like when I was reading about it on Wikipedia, they were talking about how it was intended by the developers to be like truly the ultimate Kirby experience. But yeah, for me, Kirby Superstar, hands down, it's the game that when I play other Kirby games, I compare it like it is the
Yeah,
standard
you
to
wish
which
it
all
was.
other
Yeah.
Kirby games are compared. And I find most of them wanting.
Yeah, well, so I mean, I feel like that's not a game that I've ever really put that much time into. So maybe I need to rectify that. But this is one I had a really hard time with, um, because like I started my Kirby experience on the original Kirby's Dream Land on the Game Boy, and that is like has some of the Kirby DNA to it, but is like there's no copy abilities, and like there's no multiplayer, so like it just doesn't feel like it has any of the like fundamentals of Kirby to it. So like for me, the first like real Kirby game that I played, I mean I also played a lot of Kirby Epic Yarn, which is a game that I like, but have a little bit of a hard time like selling as a Kirby game because again, there's not really copy abilities, and there is multiplayer, but like it's there is multiplayer, so that is there. um so like the first like real Kirby game I think that I like really put time into is Star Allies, which yeah I don't think is a great entry point either. Like it's super easy and it's available on Switch and everything. So I think I don't really have a good answer for this, and I will just you know defer to you on it.
Well, well, thank you. Um, well, one additional thing I wanted to say is when you were saying that like oh, but like the different like mini games or the different adventures that are in Kirby Superstar are kind of short. I got like weirdly defensive, but you're actually right. Like they're not like all that long. But
Thank
I,
you. Now defer
but I
to
actually,
me. Defer to me.
but I actually think that it's a virtue because like thinking of my experience with Star Allies, that is the meat of that is like one long like adventure. And
See,
for
I feel
me,
like you're selling Star Allies a little bit short because there are I like yes, there is one long adventure, but there's also like 3 or 4 like discrete very small mini games, and then on top of that there's the sort of like boss rush thing and like the level rush. Like there are a lot of
you're
game
right.
modes in Star Allies as well. And I know
Yeah.
that is something that like Star Allies is I think sort of like a regular-ish punching bag for like everyone, but I don't think the game is actually bad. Like I think it does a good
Well,
job of being a Kirby game.
see, I just don't agree with. Like when I was playing like I played now, I will say when I played Star Allies, we've talked about this in the past, like I played it single player, which I think was
Right.
a huge mistake. And I also played it I wonder if I went back to if I first played that game instead of if I played it at launch, if I played it like a year later or like 6 months later, if my esteem for it would have been higher because all the added content and the added like allies and all that kind of stuff would have been there. But I was very done with the game by the time any of that stuff was rolling
Yeah.
out. But I guess like Kirby's I guess what I wanted to say for Kirby Superstar is that you're right that the individual like components are not particularly long. Even like the longest one, the longest like campaign mode for lack of a better term, like is it probably would take an hour to to
Sure.
get through. But I actually think that, but for me, that like short and sweet experience is a virtue in a Kirby game because I don't think that the Kirby like gameplay really holds up to like long sustained campaigns, which is how I
Totally.
felt in Star Allies, where it was just like this is really long and it feels just like for the most part really like repetitive.
Yeah. I mean, Star Allies is so interesting in that, like, I wonder if it would be like just a more fun game if you just like if it was just a game that you had and had for like a year and like played with your siblings or whatever, like
Yeah.
um especially because like everyone could, it's 4 player simultaneous if you have the people in the controllers. Um but I will I'll stop shouting about it and I will go back to deferring to you.
I mean, you can say that Kirby Star Allies would be your entry point to the series.
I mean, I can, but it's not an opinion that I hold like strongly enough. I mean, I
Fair
also like
enough. Yeah.
wrote a note on here that Kirby Planet Robobot is also a cool and
Mm-hmm.
like fun game on the 3DS that does it's a little bit too iterative on the Kirby formula, which would make it like an odd thing to suggest as like the starting point, because then like all other Kirby experiences after that are going to be missing the Kirby rides a big mech component of it.
Right. No, I mean, I think that's a really interesting point. Like that was kind of the conflict that I came up in a lot of these series is it's like, okay, like if I was introducing somebody to it, what do you value? Is it like the one that is the most pure form of that
Right.
franchise, or is it like the one that I enjoyed the most? And that conflict kind of comes up like in some of the franchises we'll talk about later, but it definitely is something that you're like, yeah, how do you boil down the essence of a series? Like, what do you really value when you're trying to introduce somebody to it?
Um, that is as good a time as any to move on to our next. So sorry, your game is called Kirby Superstar. Is that right?
Superstar, yeah.
Superstar. And I will not log my entry because I don't believe that I don't believe that I have one. Our next franchise is Super Mario RPG. Now, obviously, this is going to be all encompassing. Anything that has Mario and is an RPG. So could be Super Mario RPG: Legend of the Seven Stars. Could be the Paper Mario series. Could be the Mario and Luigi series. Um, I can go first on this one. So this one I struggle with because my favorite of these games is Super Mario RPG: Legend of the Seven Stars on the Super Nintendo. A game that is developed by Square Enix, SquareSoft at the time, and feels like a goofy Final Fantasy game, but with Mario characters instead. Like that is just so my jam. It is very light and easy and turn based and whatever. But I feel as though that is not really representative of what the rest of the Mario RPG style games actually have to offer. And I think that there is a lot of that game that doesn't age as well as I think it does, yeah, as well as like, it has such a high place in my heart that like I can't, I, yeah, I cannot pick it. So instead, I am going with Mario and Luigi Bowser's Inside Story. Um, because I think one of the things that the Mario RPG series, the Mario and Luigi and Paper Mario series do so well is they kind of fluctuate back and forth between traditional turn-based combat and like exploration, like normal RPG stuff, and sort of mini game based event showcases, right? Where they will like put you in a little situation where you have to achieve something that is either bigger or stranger or whatever, and it's executed by doing these mini games. And Bowser's Inside Story has such a wild variety of these things that like you don't really know from moment to moment how you're going to be playing the game. Are you going to be Mario and Luigi like side scrolling inside Bowser? Yep. Are you going to be Bowser on like an overworld like top down map? Yep. Are you going to be swinging hammers on a raft inside Bowser's bloodstream to like knock bolts away? Yup. Are you going to turn into a giant Bowser and flip your 3DS sideways and like box that way? It is like a nonstop gameplay variety thing, and that I think is sort of essence of what makes the Mario RPGs different from like all other kinds of RPGs.
Oh, that's so. I have never played Bowser's Inside Story. What was it? Was it originally released on the DS? Was it a Game Boy
Yeah.
Advance game?
No, it's originally a DS game, and then remade for the 3DS recently with Bowser Jr.'s story as a sort of pack
Yeah.
game there, which I think is like an ignorable additional mode. But the remake is super pretty and is good and cool, and the 3D man. When I was playing that game a couple months ago, like I couldn't sleep and I just like stayed up and played it kind of through the night, and I got to one of those like you are enormous Bowser, like castle size Bowser, and you have to flip the 3DS on its side, so it's you're on one screen and the enemy is on the other, and it just feels like so epic and big and fun, and every attack requires like a different mini game to like execute it well, and like it's not a game that I've finished, and it's not a game I think that you need to finish, right? I think it's just a game that you need to experience for a while, and then you'll know what it has to offer, and by extension, what the rest of the Mario RPG series have to offer.
Oh man, like you convinced me. Nothing that I had seen or heard about that game previously had me interested in it really. But like your description of it and all the different like dynamic changes that it has in store, like that sounds super fun. Like it sounds like something I would be interested in.
What did the remake sold something like really like 80,000 copies or something like really really pathetic.
Was that the second one they did? Because they did. Oh yeah, Partners in Time. Was that the first
No,
one that they remade?
yeah, that's right. No, or yeah, Superstar. Maybe it's Mario and Luigi. It's the first one that they
Superstar
remade.
Saga.
Yeah, I think that's right.
I can't remember. I don't know. I haven't played any of those games. But yeah, like yeah, I think it did sell really abysmally, and that was one of the first signs that like the Switch had kind of cut off the legs of the 3DS
Totally.
as far as software sales go. But yeah, like that sounds like a really good entry point because I agree with you 100% that the charm of the Mario RPG series in general, whatever like specific franchise or specific branch of that you're talking about, is definitely the little like vignettes that you experience in them.
Yeah.
And so my pick is Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door, and this one kind of hurts me a little bit to recommend, only because it's
How do you
like
play
you
it?
have you have to have a GameCube, you have to have a Wii, you have to have the physical disc. This is one that I really wish that they would bring back as part of like a virtual console, a remake, a remaster, whatever you want to do. Because to me this is like the Mario RPG. Um, and it's a lot of it is like those little like vignettes, the little the because the game is broken up into a bunch of different sequences, and each sequence, it has like a mini story all its own. So the memorable ones for me in Thousand Year Door, like the Glitz Pit, which is this kind of like underground wrestling ring, and there's like a whole sequence that takes place in there, or the Excess Express, which is like kind of like a Mario RPG take on. It's a train, and it's kind of like a Mario RPG take on Murder on the Orient Express type like mystery.
They all did it.
And just like
They all teamed
yeah,
up to
like
do
it's
it.
just it's it's so it's just really memorable, and it's all the stuff that Mario RPGs, again, no matter the branch, are known for, which is really funny, clever writing,
Yeah.
really appealing, likable characters. This has it in spades. And I also think it's like a really fun battle system, which I wouldn't say I really like value that much. In Paper Mario in general. Like I played Origami King over the summer and really enjoyed it. And like looking at the differences between the battle system in Thousand Year Door and Origami King, like you can definitely see how they got from one to the other. Like they're not so radically different. The big thing with with Thousand Year Door is like it is much more like it's much more clearly an RPG system where
Yeah.
you get a certain amount of like heart points or flower points or badge points, and then that changes, like you're able to like put your abilities into different things. But
It's
Yeah, it's
funny
just
for both of our suggestions. I worry that we are setting people up to never like Mario RPGs ever again, right? Like because we're suggesting both that have like sort of traditional turn-based combat systems where that is obviously the Mario RPG series is moving away from with Color Splash and Paper Jam and Sticker Star and Origami King, that they all have this sort of like either a limited resource thing in the sticker and color games, or this like weird radial puzzle element in Origami King. Um, I just like I wonder if Nintendo will ever get back to the sort of basic Mario RPG.
and I think that is the big question. Like, what is the combat like in the Mario RPG series? Like in um, Bowser's Inside Story.
So like all of the Mario and Luigi games, it is uh, regular turn based, and always with like your basic attacks will have like you just have to push the button at like a special time to like deal a little bit more
Mm-hmm.
damage, and you can similarly do you can dodge or deflect attacks against your characters in much the same way. Um, so like it's a turn based where you have to like pay attention when you're actually executing the
That's
actions.
so wow. Wow. It. I knew that there were similarities between that like Mario and Luigi branch and like Paper Mario, but like that basically is like Paper
Yeah.
Mario RPG combat. But at least like I think you're right that obviously with Bowser's Inside Story selling really poorly, Alpha Dream, the developer of it, went bankrupt. I mean, I'm assuming the two are correlated somehow. They may not be direct, like
Right.
directly. One might not directly cause the other, but
I mean, their previous game also sold abysmally on the 3DS, the remake of Superstar
oh,
Saga.
did
So
it?
yeah,
Oh wow.
I
So
mean, it
yeah,
sold
so like
better, but not not
yeah.
better.
So I think like that like Mario and Luigi series is put to rest for now anyways. Paper Mario has evolved into kind of like a different beast altogether. Yeah, there really is no like pure Mario RPG, but if somebody were to get into it, I think there are, a number of Mario and Luigi's
Yeah,
games that they could play. There's the previous Paper Mario game, which I don't know how you're going to get it, but you could potentially,
the
find it
original
on
on
a
Nintendo
Nintendo
64. Yeah,
64. So there would be at least some more for you to explore. It's not a complete dead end if you're getting into it for the first time.
right. Well, and also there is always like something fun in like knowing what the base form of the RPG is and seeing how they iterate on it in those other games, even if it ends up not being like, even if the twist isn't something that you particularly
Yeah.
jive with, you at least have like this the foundation to work from.
Yeah, like
Um,
Origami
yeah,
King, definitely not that like, definitely a different take on Paper Mario, but still had like the charm of the writing, amazing music.
yeah.
I still had a ton of fun with it. So I think that's definitely true.
Next up, Mark. Maybe another. This is another one that feels like it's going to be tough or controversial. We are doing Donkey Kong Country. Would you like to go first?
For me, I think it's hands down Tropical Freeze. I don't
Absolutely, I
know that
100%
there's a
agree with you.
better Donkey Kong
Yes.
Country game. Like, I think it's kind of perfect. And again, I didn't play it on the Wii U. I guess I played a little bit with you on the Wii U, but I played through the whole thing on the version that was released for Switch, and that's the one that I 100% recommend. The quality of life additions, the addition of like Funky Kong, which like is a character who is very overpowered, like because the game can be difficult, and so like
Yep.
having the extra heart, having the extra life in every character, like all that kind of stuff makes such a huge difference that but I loved it. The presentation's amazing, the music is mind blowing, the platforming is so amazing. I hope that we get another Donkey Kong Country game in
Me
that
too.
vein because I love Tropical Freeze so much.
Yeah, and I think there's another part of this too that we don't really talk about when we're talking about the old Donkey Kong Country games. Um, but they don't have true like two player co op simultaneous. Like it's a tag in, tag out. Now you're playing, now I'm playing. Um, which like was fine, I guess, for the time, but like once you play a little bit of Tropical Freeze or Donkey Kong Country Returns, where you are two players on the screen at the same time, like exploring the level together, um, anything less than that feels incomplete, right? So like for me, it simply has to be either Tropical Freeze or Donkey Kong Country Returns. And you know, Returns is tough because it is a good game, but as it appears on the Wii, the forced like motion controls that you have to they're really poorly implemented, right? You have to shake the Wii remote in order to make Donkey Kong like roll, which means that you're doing a lot of precision platforming. That's there's no way to get precision out of a waggle, right? So unfortunately, I have to counter recommend Donkey Kong Country Returns, even though they put those things on button presses on the 3DS version. Then it becomes harder to play it multiplayer because it's on your 3DS. So yeah, I think Tropical Freeze is like easily the right answer, and doesn't make going back to Donkey Kong Countries 1, 2, or 3 less fun. Like I think those games are still fun and challenging and like cool relics of an older time, but like you can appreciate them as relics at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. And the one thing I want to add to what you were talking about multiplayer is I love in Tropical Freeze the ability, like the variety in characters. You have Cranky Kong,
Mm.
you have Diddy Kong, you have Dixie Kong, you have Funky Kong. Like there are just so many options, and that also makes it fun to like choose your play style.
Also, and this is something that like it feels so weird to go back to the Super NES games and not experience this. But Tropical Freeze does such a good job at the end of the level of saying, here are the percentage of the collectibles of each kind that
Oh yeah, totally.
that's like there are 7 puzzle pieces, you found 5. And then you can also buy items with, in-game currency that will help you find the other collectibles that you didn't get the first time through. Like for a game in a series that it's so focused on collecting stuff and completion rates, Tropical Freeze and I guess also Returns are the first time the series is like giving you the tools to track your progress on those fronts. And it's just it's nuts to me that that's not in the Super NES games.
I also think that the Switch version specifically does a good job of being like all ages, because Tropical Freeze on the Wii U before, like is a
Yeah,
very
it's tough.
notoriously like difficult game. But like I mentioned, like the things that they added to the Switch version to make it friendlier, and like the challenge is still there if you want it, but it just makes it more approachable for everybody, and I think that's a huge win for that game.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Okay, so we have just the one recommendation for Donkey Kong Country. Play Tropical Freeze. Neither of us, by the way, even mentioned Donkey Kong 64. Is that because we don't count it as a country game? It's got to be, though, right? Like, what else is it?
I think you count it. I don't like it. So that's why I didn't mention
Great point.
it. I and also just talk about like evolutionary dead ends. Like Donkey Kong
Yeah.
64 is kind of a prime mate example.
All right, so moving on to our next franchise.
You liked it.
I
You
did. I
liked
loved
it.
it. I loved it. I'm sorry. I shouldn't be negging you. I'm sorry. Um, we're doing Metroid next. Mark, would you like to go first or should I?
I feel, I feel like between the two of us, like Metroid is kind of your series, so I'm gonna let you go first.
Okay, so my favorite of the Metroid games is Super Metroid, hands down. And that may be a function of, that's the game that I played when I was, 11 or whatever. So I'm gonna love it for the rest of my life. On our most recent playthrough for this show, back in April of last year, which I cannot believe that was a year ago now. Um, some of these seams on this game started to show for me, especially in the late game, right? There's so much of Meridia is frustrating to navigate and like not super fun. And, just the sort of like wet, dreary atmosphere drags the whole game down for me um, in a way that doesn't make it any less my favorite, but does make it perhaps a stranger or like less inviting place. to put new players, especially new players in 2021, right? If we're recommending games that are entry points for now, so let's talk about the way people play games now, which means that I am going with Metroid Zero Mission on the Game Boy
Yes.
Advance.
Yes. This makes me so excited. Okay, great. Yeah, yeah. Keep talking.
It's I assume this was your take as well, because I know this is your favorite Metroid game, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So it perfectly recontextualizes the adventure, the very first Metroid game, which, as far as I'm concerned, is almost unrevisitable. Like, you can't play the original
Totally.
Metroid now. It's too obtuse. You need to draw your own maps. Everything deals way too much damage until you get, like, I don't know, 2 hours into the game, and then you have way too much health. And so, like, the balance and the pacing on the original game are just totally borked. And this saves that completely. And then, also speaking to the pacing problems that I identified in Super Metroid, this does not have that, because when you get to the end, they pull out this like zero suit thing, and you have to go like kind of stealthy. The game mixes itself up entirely, and becomes like something else that is still somehow the same and super compelling and super fun. I just don't think there is a better like introduction to Metroid than Zero Mission.
Yeah, I completely agree. I love Zero Mission. I think way back in, man, like the first year of this podcast when we ranked definitively the best Metroid games, it did come down to like Zero Mission and Super Metroid, and I think at the time Super
Yeah.
Metroid won out. But like Zero Mission is, I completely agree with everything you said. Um, it is. I just wish it was easier to play. Like I haven't played
Yeah.
it for years now because I is it available on the 3DS eShop or like on Virtual Console?
No.
Like, I don't think
So
it is.
yeah, it was one of the 3DS like ambassador games. So if you bought a
Oh,
3DS early before the price drop, it would have been something that you got. But no, you cannot buy it on the 3DS. It is available on the Wii U Virtual Console because there are GBA games available there. But yeah, that is too hard. It's too hard to get a copy of it.
Yeah, which is such a bummer because I agree with you. Like, I think this is such a great entry point for Metroid and just generally like a great Metroid game. What I love is that when they were doing this, like, Metroid Fusion had come out not that long ago. It was kind of Metroid Prime was had come out not that long ago. Like it was a really exciting time for Metroid.
Yeah.
And I feel like what Metroid Zero Mission did was it took like all the cool things about Metroid from the past. Like you have the wall clink from Fusion. It added like some of the narratives, like the idea of telling story through just like the environment that really like Super Metroid is really well known for, but they take that idea and they use it really well in like to retell the story of that first Metroid game and really give like that moment in Samus's life like context for the Metroid series in general. And I know that story would eventually get a bad rap with Zero Mission, but like
Yeah.
this was Metroid doing story like so well. Um the improved controls, I feel like it's like they had to pare it down because like the Game Boy Advance only had two face buttons, and so I feel like there's just like a little less complicated, but also tighter. Like Metro or Samus for me in Super Metroid is a little floaty. Like it just doesn't feel as tight, and I feel like they really like tightened up the movement in Zero Mission. It's just so good, man. I want to play this game again. It is definitely the one that I recommend for people who are trying to get into Metroid for the first time and understand it. It has like the right amount of like pointing you in the right direction, which is another thing that drives me crazy about Super Metroid, is that feeling of just being like, I don't really know where I'm supposed to go.
Yeah.
I don't
Totally
remember where
lost.
I
Yeah.
was, like all that kind of stuff. Um, and Zero Mission finds an amazing for me balance between giving you that sense of exploration that Metroid is known for, but also making sure that you're not completely like in the dark as to what you should be doing.
I also think it leaves you in the best position when you finish it to then start exploring other entries in the series, right? Like If you were digging the story parts of it, then like Fusion is a good place to go next. If you were digging like the times when you were getting lost, like Super Metroid is a fun place to go after that. If you want something more like actiony, then like Samus Returns is a cool place to go after that. And if you much rather prefer first person shooters, then you've got the Prime games to go to, right? Like I just feel like it provides a foundation in both a like gameplay in terms of gameplay and obviously in terms of story, because that's where the story of Metroid starts. Um, and as much as it hurts me to not recommend Super Metroid, which I still think is a wonderful game and I love it, it's still my favorite. I think Zero Missions got to be the way to go here.
Man, this is wow. So that's 2 in a row that we've been on the same page. So I'm curious if that's going to keep going as we roll into Zelda, The Legend of Zelda, and we're of course going to be talking. We decided to split these up into like 2D and 3D varieties. So we're going to
Yeah.
be talking about the 2D varieties first.
Mark, we'll let you go first on the 2D Zelda games.
Um, yeah. So for me, I just went with the Link to the Past.
Yeah,
I think
this is the correct answer.
it's so like foundational to Zelda in general, and or I guess Zelda in general and Zelda specifically. Like so much of what works in Ocarina of Time and so much that works in the Zelda franchise for so long is the foundation that is apparent in A Link to the Past. Um, I think that it has aged really, really well, like
Really
really
well, yeah.
gracefully. Like it still looks good, especially with the renaissance of kind of like pixel art in indie games. Like I think that just reflects really well on A Link to the Past, where um, I think there was a stretch, maybe during the PS3 generation, where some of that stuff, like for people who grew up on it, that kind of like lovingly crafted retro look was really appealing to us, but maybe like didn't really appeal to people who were just coming into gaming because it looked so old. And I think that it's now been around long enough, and it has been so influential to indie games that it has like come back around, and like even just like stuff like Minecraft, where like kind of it has come around to being super cool. And yeah, I think Link to the Past is just like a fine wine; it just gets better with age.
I 100% agree. And this is my pick as well, and partially because like looking at the other options, nothing else really came close, right? Like I
Yeah,
think
that
it
too.
it is it is possible that A Link Between Worlds is a better game. That is possible. But there's no way you start with A Link Between Worlds, as it is like a direct sequel to A Link to the Past that I'm sure you can play it without having played A Link to the Past, but like being in that same version of Hyrule and reconsidering the spaces of those worlds, for me was an integral part of that experience. So like, do not start with A Link Between Worlds. Start with A Link to the Past.
And Link's Awakening, like I think I went through the same thought process as you. It's like looking at the other 2D Zelda options, like where would you even start? Like it doesn't really make sense to start with Link's Awakening, because I as charming as that game is, I feel like fundamentally understanding Zelda
Yes,
games first would be a better way to go into it. I think you could start with Link's Awakening and have fun, but I don't know that you would necessarily be like, and now I want to play. I don't know that it's setting you up for success with like the rest of
totally.
the series. The
Especially
first
when you
game I don't
consider
think
the
is a good entry point.
no, the first game is a tough one to recommend. Sorry, but just before we moved off of Link's Awakening, those dungeons are also a real bummer. Like,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
it in a way that you don't really see reflected in the other Zelda games. And like I do think some of the later dungeons in A Link to the Past, like the swamp dungeon in the Dark World, the ice dungeon, Turtle Rock, all of those are a little bit too like recursive and a little bit too random, where you just have to like exist in them long enough and you'll eventually like puzzle your way to the right place. And there's no real like figuring them out. Um that just means that there are like 8 other dungeons that are almost perfect, you know. But like Link's Awakening, like none of them are really like fun or sticky or have like concepts in them that are fun to engage with. The overworld of Link's Awakening is absolutely incredible and I love it. And especially in the Switch remake, But yeah, I mean, it's just got to be Link to the Past.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree.
And it's funny that the Capcom ones don't even enter the Oracle games or Minish Cap. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I think, for better for worse, they have their virtues, but it's why I mean, just straight up, why would you start the Legend of Zelda series with a third party's take on it?
Yeah, I mean they at their best feel like more Zelda, right? Like
Right.
Minish Cap feels like more but less good Link to the Past, and the Oracle games feel like more but less good Link's Awakening, which is fine. And there's obviously a place for them. Did you consider either of the DS games at all? I'm curious.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't really. Yeah, that's actually really interesting. I didn't consider it 2D Zelda. Like when I was thinking like what games fit
Oh,
like 2D
okay, yeah.
Zelda, but it doesn't really fit 3D Zelda. I hate Spirit Tracks, so I definitely would not
You're on the
recommend that
record
as
as
its entry
hating
point.
Spirit Tracks. That's
And
right.
and as like entry points to a series, I don't think Phantom Hourglass makes much sense either.
No, it's true. Even though Linnebeck is an all-time great Zelda character,
Yeah. Oh, hands down.
and Zelda being a ghost the whole time, what a wild game.
But I think like Phantom Hourglass, like that would be a great one. Like, okay, you've introduced somebody to Zelda with A Link to the Past. They were really into it. And then like, they've maybe played a couple, and then like Phantom Hourglass is the wild card that gets thrown out there just to show the breadth of what Zelda can be.
The thing is, it to me feels like, and maybe I'm tipping my hand for when we start talking about 3D Zeldas in a second here, but it seems like a wild card on a wild card, because like Wind Waker itself is already like sort of a
Yeah, that's
subversion
true. That's
of
true.
of the Zelda formula, and then be like, and now we're doing it again. But okay, so Link to the Past is our pick for 2D Zelda. Um, let's move on to 3D Zelda. It shocks me every time that we start talking about 3D Zeldas, how few of them there really are.
I know it's wild.
There's what, like six, maybe. We've got Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, Skyward Sword, and Breath of the Wild.
Yeah, that's it.
Um, and so this is another one where I have to like push away from what I think is the best of these games, because the best of these games is Breath of the Wild, right? Um, and I am not having that as my pick here because I think it from Breath. Where do you go from there?
Yeah.
Right, like two things. Where do you go from there? There are no other games like Breath of the Wild.
I
And
mean,
also,
Skyward Sword is what Nintendo's
no,
telling
come
us.
on. You don't believe that. I don't believe that. No one believes that. Um, and also, there is enough in Breath of the Wild that is referential to Zelda's past, that I feel like it's a shame if you haven't played some other Zelda games before that. It's not going to ruin your experience if you play Breath of the Wild right away. And in fact, you'll still probably have an incredible time 'cause it's one of the best games ever made. So, maybe this is a faulty exercise, and the answer for all of these is just Breath
Well,
of the Wild.
it's interesting because like I agree with you that I would not start with Breath of the Wild either. But I think for a lot of people, Breath of the Wild is their entry point into Zelda, and I think
Hmm.
that's awesome because Breath of the Wild is an amazing game. And
It rules, yeah.
yeah, so like, great, welcome to enjoying like Zelda. But it is, I think it could be the future of Zelda, but it is definitely
Yes.
not like what the bulk the of the Legend of Zelda franchise is. So it feels like a weird place to start if you want to talk about the franchise as a whole.
Yeah. Yes. Even though it ends up being such a good like summation of the franchise, but I just feel like don't start with the summary, start with the individual pieces, and then get to the finale. What a finale it is. But so here's what I'm going with. I'm going with Twilight Princess, specifically the HD version that came out on Wii U, which is weird, of course, because the game is sort of a riff on the Ocarina of Time, um, but it is just uh, bigger and does a better job of signposting. One of the things that you were talking about in our Metroid discussion. If you don't know where you're going and what you're doing in Ocarina of Time, it is easy to get lost. especially at different points as you're skipping back and forth between being adult Link and young Link. Where Twilight Princess, while having this big open world, does allow it is like a fairly linear experience. Um, Also, the HD version cleaned up a lot of the sort of like noise at the beginning of that game, so that you can get out of the starting village way faster. Um, and I don't know, I think the game just does such a good job of like introducing you to the weirdness of the characters of Hyrule, where like things are kind of ugly but interesting and lived in, and tells a cool story. And like Midna and Wolf Link are such like compelling visual concepts, that like I don't know, I think it's just a really solid game.
Yeah, one thing I didn't pick Twilight Princess, but I totally get where you're coming from. Because I think that it kind of being a riff on Ocarina of Time is partly what makes it such a good pick.
Yeah,
Because it has so much of that DNA of like classic core Zelda, but it is more than that a little bit. And I think one of the things I really like about Twilight Princess is how dramatic it is.
yeah,
Like the story with like Midna and like the Twilight Realm and the other NPCs that you experience, like the Hyrule of Twilight Princess is a very like dramatic one of contrasts, and that makes it, I think, unique in Zelda games.
yeah, totally. How did you go with this one?
So I ended up doing Ocarina of Time, but the 3DS remake. So Ocarina
Sure.
of Time 3D is the one that I went with, and it is because I think Ocarina of Time, kind of like A Link to the Past, is so foundational to the entire series. Like I think Ocarina of Time is just like a restatement of that in 3D, and I think the 3D version cleans up a lot of the annoyances and grit of the Nintendo 64 version. That it's, for me, the Ocarina of Time 3D is like now what I think it was, the Ocarina of Time in my head, which
Yeah.
is what I wanted in like a remake. Um, and I think that like it has that that the weirdness of Hyrule, the weirdness of the NPCs, all of that. I think it, for me, honestly, it's just that Ocarina of Time is a smaller, shorter, more digestible package.
Mm.
Whereas I
Mhm.
think of Twilight Princess as like an epic that you have to devote a significant amount of time to. And so that's really like what it boiled down to, was a lot of it is just like time investment for the same kind of like grand experience.
Yeah. Well, and we will talk about how the Nintendo 64 games have aged, just in general as we get further into this list. But I do think that even with like the 3DS remake, that there's still a lot of like Nintendo 64-ness to
Mm-hmm.
Ocarina of Time, which can just be a hurdle, um, for people who didn't experience it, uh, when that was what gaming was, right? Like there is, you're praising like the smallness of the game, which I think is right. But some of the individual moments can also feel small as well.
Totally, totally.
And I think it's so. I just wanted to briefly mention Wind Waker, because we brought it up in the last segment, but also like it is such a good game. It is such a fun game. It's a beautiful world and everything, but like it is absolutely a uh like it needs you to know what Zelda games are supposed to be, and then like flips it around and does something different with it.
Yeah, I completely agree. And again, when you're talking about at the very beginning of this episode, you're talking about like discrete trilogies, and there, you have like Wind Waker, Phantom Hourglass, and Spirit Tracks, wah wah. But like I think Wind Waker is an amazing discovery for Zelda fans, but it's
Yes.
not where I would start.
Yeah. Not where you would start, and also yeah, you're like, where do you go from there? Like I guess just to Breath of the Wild, but like that's not fair. You can do that with any of them. So good. And then of course neither of us chose Majora's Mask or Skyward Sword, but I think that you know that's self evident as to why we didn't do that. All right, so now we are moving on to 2D Mario. Mark, would you like to go first?
Yeah, I ended up going. This one was really tough for me. I
Me too.
debated a lot between Mario 3 or New Super Mario Brothers U. and I ended up going with
Oh.
New Super Mario Brothers U. Don't know that it is necessarily the best game in the franchise, but I replayed it last year and as like a single player experience for the first time, and I really, really, really loved it in a way that I was not expecting to. Um, and but I think the reason I am picking it is because it is a modern Mario 2D game, and it is like the most recent one, and I think it's the best of like the modern Mario 2D games. And I think the modern aspect, like the contemporary, is the reason why I'm choosing it as the entry point, because I have a difficult time recommending, as much as I love Super Mario Brothers 3, I have a difficult time like recommending somebody go back and like have that as their first Mario experience in this day and age.
That's interesting because that is my choice is Super Mario Brothers 3. And partially because most of the ways that you can play it now, either on your NES Classic Edition or on the NES Switch Online, has built-in save functions, save state functions or rewind, to sort of like sand down the hard NES game edges. Not to say that the game is overly difficult, because it's not, right? Like you can play it straight, and it's will present you with some challenges, but like isn't is doable. Um, I think for me, where three gets the edge over something like you or even World, is that like I just I like the way the game holds on to power ups and then like gives them to you later in the game as like fun special rewards, and it feels like genuinely fun and special when you get the frog suit, when you get the Tanuki suit, when you get the Hammer Brothers outfit. Like they're all like rare enough and specific enough and like foundationally change the way you're interacting with the game enough, that they just feel fun and special in a way that like I don't know, you don't really have that feeling in other Mario games, or if you do, like, I guess maybe that makes it not a good starting point. But like there's the level with the boot, the shoe that you jump around in World 5. And like I remember that being just like a moment that I treasured, this one level that this power up was in, and like playing the whole game just to get to that, and have that fun. So maybe this is me looking back on something with rose tinted glasses, but like I don't know, it's just so, the game is so specific and so stylized and so cool, that it ends up being like foundational to Mario in that way. One of the things I don't love about you is that it's not about you, about New Super Mario Brothers U, is that it is in that New Super Mario Brothers style, which is pretty sterile, and just like kind of plasticky and samey. So
It
yeah, it
is.
yeah.
It is, but like I also feel like that is how Mario is presented today. Like the look of that world is the look of the Mushroom Kingdom,
Hmm.
for all intents
Yeah,
and
true.
purposes. What? So I didn't end up choosing Mario 3, but one of the reasons why, like, I think it would make a great entry to the Mario franchise is it is such a great like illustration of concentrated Mario joy. Playing that game
Yes.
really conveys the joy of Mario. And the levels are like compact, like the levels are short. It's kind of like fast paced. You see so many different flavors, so many different levels, so many different takes on the same mechanics. Like that is exciting. That is what like makes Mario fun. And so I think it's a great ambassador for like the joy of Mario. And I think one of the kind of, I'll say, like downsides of the later games in Super Mario Brothers U is that they also have like multiplayer, which is super chaotic and super fun, but it changes the nature of the platforming
Yeah,
that you're
totally.
doing.
Hmm.
Whereas like Mario 3 is like, because it's just like that like discrete single player experience, that the levels are designed very specifically for that. And I think there's no better showcase for what Mario can be, or like the joy of Mario, than Super Mario Brothers 3. But I think for like what Mario is and the breadth of
Mm,
Mario, I
so
still go
interesting.
with New Super Mario Brothers U.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Like I think you are right that there is more of what Mario is now and is likely to be in the future in New Super Mario Brothers U uh and more of like where Mario came from in Super Mario Brothers 3. Where both of us are sort of avoiding World, even though I know we're both big fans of Super Mario World. Um, why isn't that one that seems like it was on your list of contenders here?
The interesting thing about World for me is, they kind of like downshift in gears a little bit with World. It's not as fast paced as Super Mario Brothers 3. It's a little bit slower. It's a little bit more about exploration. That would definitely become even more evident as it turned into like the Yoshi franchise.
Yeah,
But I think that's why for me, just because World simultaneously feels like a natural evolution of Mario 3 because it is so much like bigger and grander and truly like super for a game for the Super Nintendo. But it also doesn't feel like any other Mario game. It just
yeah,
kind of is its own like weird 2D exploration of what Mario
yeah.
can be.
Totally. And I think for me, I also, if you start with Mario 3, if that's your entry point, then an obvious second step is Super Mario World, right? Like you can just
Yeah.
see
Yep.
what is effectively the same game, but like just newer and in a lot of ways better. Like I think Super Mario World is a probably a better game, probably my favorite of the 2D Marios, but is another one where it feels like it wants you to know how those games work before you go into it. All right, and then that leads us to 3D Mario games. Again, another one where I was like, oh, there really aren't that many 3D Mario games.
And they're all like very different takes on Mario for the most
Yeah,
part, other than Galaxy and its sequel. Yeah, this was the one that I definitely had the hardest time with, but also at the same time it was like a fairly easy decision because like Mario 64 and then the next one is Sunshine, which is so different from
yeah,
64, followed by Galaxy, which again is like a complete reinvention. Um yeah, it's just wild how like different each of these games are.
yeah.
How do you even begin to pin down like
100% agree.
what like 3D Mario is?
Yeah, well, and like, do you even count Super Mario 3D World in this or 3D Land? I didn't. I
I didn't
like
either.
they're both great games and like could be good starting places for it, but I'm like for whatever reason it doesn't feel like what we're talking about when we're talking about 3D Mario.
Yeah, it's like the Phantom Hourglass or Spirit Tracks of
Yep.
Mario. Yeah.
Yeah, so we need to go back and do third categories for Zelda and Mario. Um I'll go first here. I went with Super Mario Galaxy 2. Um because I absolutely adore the Galaxy games. I think they do something with Mario, like you were talking about like the sort of concentrated joy of being Mario, of like running and jumping, and that being fun and engaging and the most exciting thing you can possibly do. I don't think any of the games do that better, communicate that better than the Galaxy games. You're jumping between planets. You're a literal astronaut sailing between the stars as Mario, and you're doing it like through the power of his little feet, and you're shaking your wrist to make it all happen. It's so tactile. It's so like uh there's there's I always love just making Mario run around in 3D games. And the Galaxy 1 and 2 is like the best, most concentrated, wonderful version of that for me. And then the reason I go with 2 over 1 is it's just a bigger game. It is just a better game. It gets rid of the sort of hub world of Rosalina's spaceship, which is novel, but you quickly like when you got to get yourself back up to the observatory or the library or whatever these spaces are, it's too much. Um, in Galaxy 2, you can run around the face ship if you want to, but you don't have to. You can just like move around on a nice clear map and get to all the levels. Um, you get all the stars, and then there's a second set of stars that come after you get the first 120. There's another 120 stars in the game. Like it opens up a sequel inside itself. The Yoshi stuff is fun. It's just and it gets rid of some of the like sort of obnoxious mini games. It's like the manta ray surfing thing in the original Galaxy, which is a bummer they don't bring that back in the second one. It's just such a great game. And like I could also say the same thing for Odyssey. Odyssey is also a great game. Clearly requires you to be like a Mario historian to fully understand, appreciate, and love it. So don't start with Odyssey. Start with Galaxy 2.
Yeah, I came down to the same answer as well. I think and again, this one's a bummer because it's not like readily accessible. It would have been
Yes.
great if it was part of 3D All Stars, but yeah, I completely agree. Galaxy 2 is where I would begin. Odyssey, I think, just like Breath of the Wild, is a fine starting point. It's a great game. Like playing with Mario is fun, but to me, it's a different or it's an evolution of Mario. And I think like if I wanted to introduce somebody to just the pure joy of being Mario in 3D, I would start with Super Mario Galaxy 2. You already mentioned all like the kind of like refinements that they made from the first one to the second one. And also like the first one, it introduced the like planetary gravity mechanic, and so that's featured really prominently, and of course it is a big part of Galaxy 2, but I feel like they didn't feel the need to use it in everything as much because they
Yes.
had explored it so thoroughly in the first game. And so that's why I wouldn't choose the first one, just because it is a different type of Mario movement, and I feel like Galaxy 2 has all of that but also just has more traditional just Mario platforming.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's, there is a point later in the game where, like one of the levels is the Thwomp Fortress from Super Mario 64. So like it's that sort of thing that this game can do, where it's like, no, 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 this is just like one big planet area, um, that like just feels really like good and fun to explore. Like it does such a nice job of mixing in those levels that are like sort of course based, but also sort of like exploration based. Um, and also, I know there is a final level in the original Super Mario Galaxy, which is like tough and challenging, but the very last star in Galaxy 2 is a brutal a brutal take on this like final obstacle course called Perfect Run. Um and it is, man, it is one of those like Mario levels where like you have to be, in a trance to do it right. It's like the Champions Road at the end of 3D World. It's like the darker side of the moon in Odyssey, um where like, you've been messing around with the game for long enough. Now you want to really challenge yourself. Like, here's the opportunity, and it like delivers on that challenge in like a fun, satisfying way.
Yeah. And also, honestly, for this one, it's a little bit of like process of elimination where you're like, there's no way I'm starting with Mario 64 just
Right.
because of it, it was the first of its kind. And so it hasn't aged amazingly. There's no way I'm doing Sunshine. Odyssey is like, it's too soon. And then 3D World, I didn't even think about. So just kind of by process of elimination, it's
It's
the
got to be one of the
3D.
galaxies. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So those are our recommendations for where you start. Should we recap them all real quick?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So Pokemon, you either go with the one that you're going to be able to play with people, or the most recent one. Likely they are one and the same, and likely Go will will fill that in for you. Fire Emblem, either Awakening or Three Houses. Um, Kirby, Mark says Superstar. I don't have anything to offer on that one. The Mario RPGs, I say Bowser's Inside Story. Mark says Thousand Year Door. Donkey Kong Country, we both say Tropical Freeze. Metroid, we both say Zero Mission. 2D Zelda, we both say Link to the Past. 3D Zelda, Mark says Ocarina of Time. I say Twilight Princess. 2D Mario, Mark says New Super Mario Brothers U. I say, or New Super Mario Brothers U Deluxe, right? I assume you're doing the
Yeah.
Wii
Oh, yeah.
version or the Switch version. And I say Super Mario Brothers 3. And for 3D Mario, we agree Super Mario Galaxy 2 is the place to start with 3D Marios. You bet. That's what we say. All right, Mark, let's close this out. Would love to know if our listeners have other games that they recommend as entry points for these series, or if there are a series here that we've kind of overlooked, that are, like within the realm of Nintendo games, and what those entry points are. You can write into us at Nintendo Cartridge Society at
At
gmail.com.
gmail.com.
and let us know. We can talk about them next week. All right, that's going to do it for this episode of Nintendo Cartridge Society. Remember, please rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts. If you like the episode, you can share it on Facebook or Twitter or wherever you share stuff. We appreciate it when you do that. It helps us out tremendously. And then other people get a chance to, get a copy of Fire Emblem or the Tokyo Mirage Sessions or whatever it is, or borrow my copy of Sonic Forces, or listen to this fun stuff that we talk about. Fun stuff. My God. You can follow us on Twitter. I'm at Patrick_Ellers. Mark is at MK Mitchell. The show is at Nin Cart Society. We also have a Facebook page, which is just Nintendo Cartridge Society. Olivia Duncan made our logo. Our theme music is provided by 8-Bit Betty. You can get more of his music by going to 8bitbetty.com or by listening right now. For my co-host, Mark Mitchell, this is Patrick Ellers saying thank you for listening.
Hey, Oscar, Rachel, do you like Disney movies?
Yeah!
Have you seen all of them?
Yeah, we saw all the Disney animated movies.
And we saw all the Pixar animated movies too.
How about the DComs?
What?
The Disney Channel original movies. You should listen to our podcast, Inside the Disney Vault, because we are watching all of them in chronological order.
Yeah, and we do fun segments like we cast each other.
That's right, and my favorite segment, Zaddy Watch, where we rank every single DCOM daddy.
Ooh, you can listen to all this fun stuff on our podcast, Inside the Disney Vault on Campfire Media, wherever you listen to podcasts.
All right, guys, let's get back in the vault. It's cold out here.
Campfire.